but for ordinary British people, they don't feel that they're being represented. No one wants the NHS dismantled. My mate Lee, who's a fireman in Grays, who's like the Fire Brigade Union, can't get no coverage in the media, who are facing terrible cuts, who can no longer do their jobs healthily, safely and effectively. These are the kind of people that we're addressing, and it needs to be through creative direct action, because the apparatus for ordinary people to be engaged politically simply doesn't exist. And that's what came up in my last interview with your predecessor, Jeremy there, and which is more and more prevalent as I've been going on this.
What do you think about what he's saying so far?
Well, my first, but aside from the content of what he was saying, it gave me a very politician vibe, where I just randomly was thinking, like, I wonder if he'll if we flash forward a couple years and he's like running for PM.
Yeah.
And he even did politician trick where they mention a person by name, like my friend Lee, who works in the thing, and then he's doing the points. Like, it's very...
Like, he's got some sort of PR training at the very least to... Yeah. And he's just very good at expressing himself. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's what I was mostly thinking the whole time watching him. I'm like, I feel like he's...
he'd make a good politician.
He'd make a good politician, and he'd make a politician I think a lot of the younger generation would definitely...
Get behind.
He's
got charisma. He's obviously been in Hollywood, so he's comfortable in front of a camera and just comfortable with expressing himself.
Mm-hmm. And he seems informed, or at the very least willing to inform himself on certain topics, like open to being informed rather.
Yeah.
You know.
What do you think about what he said as far as, the average person not having the political apparatus to, I guess he was saying, express themselves or just participate? Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess I can agree with that, because otherwise, aside from voting, what is the average person really? What tool do they really have? Especially if you're just like you're just working your regular job, you're coming home to your family, rinse and repeat. You're not, and maybe you don't have the time to be like attending the city council, the open forums or the town halls. Like, you don't have the extra space in your life to participate in these,
You're so preoccupied with just living that you can't effectively participate. You can, but it's difficult to participate as a citizen.
As an average citizen, yeah. And then not even talk about the ones who maybe they work overnight, or the ones who have like 3 or 4 jobs, or that they're just trying to get through. Then there's the assumption that the people who are voting have looked into the topics, the policies that they're voting for.
Yeah. You think that's by design? Like, you think the way things are, obviously, I'm not going to get into the weeds of, like, is there some specific group, but do you think the way the system is structured, and it being structured in a way which conveniently makes it creates significant constraints for the average citizen to participate effectively in the political process? Do you think that's by design?
I feel like I'm stuck in the middle with that, because my optimistic side is saying no, it's not by design, because there are open forums where you can go, like, there are spaces where you can go and you can participate, you can reach out to your representative or whatever, like those avenues are open. So it's almost like this appearance that you can be an active participant, and then and then they always kind of throw that back at you, like, if you don't like the way things are,
then vote and participate.
or just be more active in your community. Like, that part, I want to say no, it's not by design, because there are avenues in which you can participate. But then again, I do kind of want to say yes, it is by design, because that takes a lot of time, and that takes a lot of commitment, and if you don't have that space in your life, and like, and then I could see someone saying, well, if it's that important to you, then you'll make space in your life. I mean, yeah, that's all good, to say, but the reality is, if you are in that group of people who are and it's like a lot of us who are just trying to get from day to day, you have your family to take care of, you have, maybe you have ill family members, maybe you're ill, like you have your life to contend with. There's no space.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that people now are more politically active and engaged than they were, say, in the 1920s or 1910s?
I want to.
It's a tough question, right?
It is a tough question because I want to actually say no.
Intuitively, you want to say no.
I want to say no, but
why?
But what it feels like is yes, and I only feel like saying yes, people are more engaged, is because we have more
information.
We have more information, and we have the technology to kind of be connected, and be informed of certain things at a lightning speed, as opposed to like maybe in the 1920s where your
information is coming through a filter.
Right.
There's only like a couple organizations distributing the information, so what is going through a filter, and you better hope that filter isn't oriented towards propaganda, which is very unlikely that it wouldn't be. So you're getting propaganda. Everything you're consuming there's some bent or some twist or some ulterior motive or some agenda behind everything you're consuming, because you're getting it through a filter. Whereas now there's Twitter, where you're getting information. Yeah, of course, the actual individual tweeter may be, he has an agenda, but it's much more pure and you're getting raw data. You get what I'm saying? So there's that difference. But let's be real. The average person is not consuming information through Twitter. They're consuming it still through these 4 main corporations that are, highly agenda driven, and they have motivations outside of informing people, but rather propagandizing towards people, demagoguery. You get what I'm saying? Mm. And so your opinion is people in the 1910s, 20s were more politically engaged or less? What is your opinion?
I feel like my opinion is they probably were as politically engaged. It's just the way they're receiving the information is different, and the time frames in which you're receiving information is different. So like if you were some rural farmer or whatever, and some policies are coming down the pipeline that are going to affect you and your livelihood, maybe you're not going to hear about it. So I don't think it's whether they're any more or less active. I just think it's the way that they're receiving the information that will increase, that technically increases the engagement. But I feel like in the 1920s, if they were able to receive the information at the same speed, that I feel like you would get the same kind of sentiment of.
So if we broke it down, so what you're saying is per unit of information, they were more engaged, if that makes sense. Like, so if they were getting the same amount of information that we're getting, they'd be more effective at utilizing it.
They'd be more effective, but I think the desire or the interest is the same. The interest level would have been the same.
Okay, so it's the same. So the reason I'm bringing that up is because I think they probably weren't as politically engaged, because the same arguments we're making for why people aren't engaged now, those issues were far more significant, right? Like people were working far more hours. There were far less workers' rights, right? So employers were far more abusive and taking advantage of their employees. So if we're making the argument that it's because of employers that people aren't able to engage politically because they lack the time and the motivation. And we're far more, we have an environment, a worker's environment that is far more conducive and beneficial for the employee compared to the 1920s, 1910s, which I don't even think they had, like, they're still working like 16-hour days or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't it be the case that they were far less likely to be engaged politically because all their time was being taken up?
I think I
You get what I'm saying?
added a different
You added a different perspective. Like,
yeah, I took it from the perspective of interest rather than actual engagement.
Yeah, but what we were talking about in this issue is it's because people aren't. We were making the argument that people aren't engaged because the employers and the way life is structured, the distractions, people just don't have time,
Right?
Because their jobs take up all the time. Yet our jobs take up far less time than they did in the 1920s.
Yeah, that's true.
Which means they were far more. Our argument stands is, if the argument is that the reason people aren't engaged politically is because of the employers taking up all of our time, then it should be the case that the people in the 1920s had it far worse and they were far less engaged politically. Yet what we see is in those eras, people were, at least, you know, what's in the history is, there was a lot more political upheavals and turmoil taking place, right? Like you had, and at least the population was far more inclined to fight back. You get what I'm saying? Like, or fight for their rights in a meaningful way. So I feel like the issue isn't the employers. In my opinion, I don't think it's the employers. I think it's the amount of distractions and propaganda that exists. Because there's so much distractions that people rather watch sports ball or whatever nonsense than it is to engage politically. And if you are going to engage politically, you have to sift through all the propaganda. So you don't even know, like, so who's going to sift through the propaganda? And if, like, you get what I'm saying? It's like, someone has a choice, like, hey, watch the World Cup or read the paper or do your own research and aggregating of sources to arrive at a conclusion.
They're going to pick the World Cup.
They're going to pick the World Cup. They're not going to sit there and do that. No, like, so it's not employed. As much as I don't want to take the side of the corporations, I don't think it's the corporations taking up our time. I do think the corporations have a role in propaganda and, you know, spreading narratives, but I don't think it's them taking our time. I think we're just distracted. We're extremely distracted, and it's weaponized against us.
Well,
Our distraction.
Well, then in that way, that sounds like it's by design. Like,
it is by design. And I think part of it is by design, but part of it is also, you could say, it just was convenient, right? So
it's low-hanging fruit.
It's convenient. Yeah, you know that, I didn't realize they would get addicted to this form of media. Guess we got to go through this form of media to spread our propaganda. So we'll, like, contact these creators and we'll figure out a way to make offers to these people and give them positions and power and status. And all they got to do is spread our bullshit message. And it's a win-win. So part of it is, like, contacting and networking with these people who are creators, and part of it is by design, because it's really what it is, in my opinion. There's a book called Bowling Alone that talks about this. Anyways, that's the video, guys. So see you guys next time. Peace.